Welcome to the Sidebar, a book club for nubile Latina sexual assault survivors. I'm David,
I'm gay, head of the Doom Squad.
And I'm Capitalissimo, the one who isn't poor.
and today we're discussing the second half of Millennium by Marty Phillips. And I also have a huge announcement. Our next read has finally been decided, and drumroll please. It is September is for Nutcells lineup. It's Nutcranker by Dan Baltic and Incel by Arx Han. I'll just go ahead and say it that
Erection.
way.
Erection.
Erection. So we're reading those next. So anyone that's listening and wants to try and play along, go ahead and pick those up now and at a completely legitimate retailer. So today we're picking back up with Millennium, parts 3 and 4, titled Casper House and American Bastard. And then let's just dive right in, guys. We have two parts to this the second half. Casper House, which I'm not even sure if qualifies as a novella or short story. I can't even recall exactly how long it was. Casper House, the shorter of the two, and then American Bastard. And Cap, if you'd be willing to give us a quick overview of Casper House, and we can talk through that.
Sure. So Casper House is the story of a man going to a small, depressed, old Pacific Northwestern town to open up a dollar store. It's told in the frame of a longtime resident of the town having been given a letter from the protagonist that explains the events of the story. And I have some thoughts about the frame, but we'll get into that later. The dollar store developer takes up residence in the old Casper house, named after the builder of the house, with plans to renovate it and sell it after his time in the town is done. He quickly finds that there are strange things afoot.
And metaphorically, in the arc of this book, where we've had so far 9/11, military adventurism, and this is sort of the spirit of the housing crash.
Literally and figuratively, the housing crash.
Yeah. I had a ton of thoughts about this one, and I did an upfront disclaimer. Marty Phillips is someone that I followed on Twitter, had a few brief interactions with, and I've listened to some interviews, so I know he's a very diligent and intentful writer, but I do have some, I would say overall the second half I found less strong than the first half. And I think this actually, Casper House in particular, I found the weakest of all of them. My big challenges I had was just the POV, which I think, Cap, you'd already made a reference to. So I'd love to hear additional thoughts you have. But for me, it starts kind of tripping out over its shoelaces. We have it's first person, but it's from two first person perspectives at the same time. That alternates. So we have an I who is someone who was born in quote unquote the late 1950s, I believe. Don't even get a specific
boomer.
year. We got a boomer in the house. The boomer is inside the house. And then we have the retail guy opening up the dollar store. And so right off the bat, it's this unnecessary confusion, this clutter of like, who is even this I speaking with these multiple transitions. They're not even chapter transitions. They're scene transitions between these two people. And the first point of view just vanishes he's just not an essential character even. And so we have pretty good sized chunks of the story that go to this guy who is not relevant to the story at all. He just gives some expository information in the first third, and then he's told the story at the end by the guy.
He's the one who's reciting the story.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's the boomer who's reciting the story that was given to him in a letter from Jake, the developer, who is a millennial.
No, they talk face to face in the end.
There is no. Yeah. Okay. So he told him the story. There's no letter.
Yeah. He interviews him. He even says I came to you looking rough.
Couch.
He leaves the body in the van and he fucks off.
Okay.
What a bastard.
So he Jake the Millennial recounts the story to Boomer Townie, and it's this absurd story, and at the end of the story, the house is destroyed and there's a dead body in the trunk. And this is what the Townie is saying in this story. So, did the Boomer do it? So is the subtext here that the Boomer did it? Because if the subtext here is that the Boomer did it, then this story goes up in my estimation. Right? If we're talking like a Gene Wolfe oblique narrative thing here, and maybe I'm giving too much credit to Marty on this, but if that is the intention here, that the Boomer destroyed the house, killed the girl, did away with Jake Peters, and then tried to pin it all on the Millennials, that's actually kind of cool. And it does certainly fit with the period of time and the overall intergenerational theming that someone who was, trying to write the bitter millennial perspective would do. So, and even though American Bastard is more focused on the intergenerational transfer between millennials and boomers, I think that there's some argument to be made that there is a subtext that Boomer Townie did it all.
That is an interesting read of it. To be honest, I think it's too subtle for what he's trying to go for.
Yeah, I think it's too subtle because we hear directly from the guy. I think if it was purely from the old boomer's perspective, I think it'd be more likely. But since we see a direct eye report relationship from whatever his name is, manager guy.
Well, but the frame is still that the boomer is saying that this is what the guy said. I mean, I get it. It's very like this was my internal monologue at the time. Like, who tells a story like that? But I'm saying maybe there was an attempt at doing
it's a cool theory.
Like that.
Yeah, if it is, it would go up a notch in my book too. If that was the case, I would just say he need more evidence for me to believe it was intentional. To me, it felt more like he was trying to. I view the old man as showing the townie as victim. Him and the girl who gets killed at the end. Mm-hmm. They're like the small town schlubs, and then there's the quote unquote big town city slicker over here, who comes in to build his dollar store, and he even has some dialogue like that where he's and she feels like he's big leaguing. I don't know. That's the way I saw their role.
You would fuck with the commentary too much if that was intentional, or you had to readjust the commentary or the theme.
Fair. I mean, yes, that is fair, but just saying.
And especially
just
since,
like,
for a fact, like here's from the boomer, right?
The boomer probably would not have described the perspective of Jake the Millennial as so hugely traumatized by a lack of money, and probably wouldn't have gone into the specific phenomenology of having sex with
the sex
girl.
scene. This was pure sex scene kino. It was. Dude, it was so much better than in terms of pure cringe factor.
I liked how not just dirty it was. Just this slam.
Yeah,
pig.
Actually, you know what? I think the scene was. I mean, it was gritty. If Marty could have sustained that level of like intense tone throughout the whole story, I mean, it would have been a banger. Like, actually, unironically,
a banger. Yeah.
Yes. but it would have been good because it is like being told by the character. The character is disgusted by it, and that was one of the sections that I thought there was really a unique voice being produced here, and I think, and that's one of the points where I think if Marty had a stronger editing hand, or was wanting to go back for a couple more rewrites to tighten things up, I think he can really produce at a higher level.
There's a lot of potential here.
But
There's a lot of potential here.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
what you said about voice is kind of true, because in reality, there's not really much. It feels like all over the place. The setup is really good, right? You got the city slicker, ruthless capitalist, and you got the narrator, right? The old man. I think his name is Gene. I'll just call him Gene. Gene, the boomer who lived through Vietnam, who lives in Raston, or whatever the hell, and he feels like it's fundamentally Paris.
I don't think there are any French towns in the Pacific Northwest.
Why would he name it like Raston? That's not an English word.
Raston.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Raston. In Raston, he lives there, and one of the first things I said was, A, it's too formal again, and first-person POV, voice is shaky as the prose, and the voice is extremely shaky. Like, you have if you read the narrator's opening monologue of his, like, looking back at his own life, it's very, very two-dimensional. Like, oh, I live in this town. We used to have lumber and timber. We loved the hills, the cove, the beauty of our land. Our only crime was not wanting to leave for the cosmopolitan parasites, right? All the young left the town.
Yep.
Once it hits you immediately. Once you move from the preface to chapter 1, the voice and style of the voice does not change. That's also why it's so confusing, unless you pay attention to like the chapter breaks. Like, is this the boomer or is this the millennial?
Yeah.
My plan was to dock.
Well, it's all the boomer. That's the.
No,
It is all the boomer.
No, that's the deep
No,
lore.
it's not the deep lore. That's
I'm
the
just
frame
not
story.
buying it.
But I mean, yes, I agree with you that it ought to have changed.
Because like I showed up in Raston late in the afternoon in a rented van, my few necessary possessions. Like the style is yet again stiff, Aspergery, and does not change. My plan was to document living and fixing up the house and turn the footage into a video blog series as a side project. So,
Which is never touched again. Never touched on
Yes.
again. He never mentions being a content creator again.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that happened.
yes, you think it's a go analog horror kind of found footage kind of.
The framing, and see, now I'm even more confused about the framing than when we came in, because I this whole like new angle of it's the old man telling him it. The way I understood it was he was telling the old man, we were hearing him tell the old man, because they're saying, like there's even lines at transitions like, that's when you saw me, and I saw you here. So I thought that was us being told it, him telling the old man and us hearing it directly from the source, and now I'm not even sure if that's the case. My note on this one was just, POV effed beyond all belief, because to your point, Gabe, the voice stays constant, and this actually is consistent in the last one as well. There's this, every first person perspective is still a Marty Phillips voice, like really clearly and distinctly, and there's just not like a lot of
Differentiations to what we got here.
Yeah, there's not. Some people complain about overcharacterization in first-person narratives, but I'd rather an overcharacterized dynamic character than just be interchangeable, because, it's just so formal, and I'm just more and more confused the more we talk about what exactly the POV is doing.
Yes, and what's the relationship? You don't feel a very strong difference between this millennial and this boomer. Right? I mean, Gene, the boomer, wants him out of town because the dollar store he's seen as a parasite, and the other perspective is that, well, the town is fundamentally built. I thought he was going to try, like, do cyclical history kind of thing, because, like, Mr. Casper, he found that the town was built on just lust for gold and greed and finance. Mm-hmm. And Gene is like, oh, it's different. We formed a town around this. We formed a civilization. We formed a society. It's when your head's in books. I think it was when the only two characters that speak is Gene, and the the old man who's the leader of the Society of Reston.
Historical Society,
yes. Yes. And
why do you insist on making Raston, California? Why do you insist on making that Reston?
It has a flavor to it. It's a Latin flavor.
It's his European
Reston.
roots.
Yeah.
I'm trying to give it some oomph. But unlike fucking Phillips, I want to give this story some character, some flavor.
So you want to base it on the never existed French settlement of Northern California.
Yes, it's alternate history. That's exactly right.
It's alternate history. Okay, I think we're not talking about the elephant in the room here with this story.
We're not talking about the beetle in the basement.
So
neither does Marty.
That's true.
Who's
at
also
one
the best
point,
character
yeah,
in the story.
At one point in this, the strange things start happening in the house to Jake the Millennial, and he begins hearing voices that are saying, help me, I'm in the basement. He can't find a basement. He doesn't know where the basement is in this house. He ends up busting a hole through a wall and finding a giant scarab beetle, an enormous, vehicle-sized beetle that can speak. And it recounts to him the story that he had been scared up and confused and burst through the wall in this basement following a historic earthquake in Reston, Gabe.
Reston.
And had become stuck there, except he's not stuck. He's just load-bearing. So the whole house is resting on this beetle, and the beetle can move, but it'll cause the house to collapse. And for whatever reason, this is the most conscientious insect intelligence ever, because Mr. Casper back in the 19th century taught this thing to speak, kept it fed, and sort of founded a weird cult around it. And eventually the beetle, who, a creature of the earth, told him where a bunch of valuable mineral deposits were. And so Casper goes down to Texas. I guess it was oil. Mm-hmm. Goes down to Texas, starts extracting these minerals and dies of a heart attack. Never comes back to fulfill his promise to free this beetle. And the beetle promises Jake riches beyond imagining if he can prove himself trustworthy. Ultimately, Jake ends up messing up his relationship with the beetle.
By the way, I loved this part. This was the best part for me.
The beetle demands to be fed a human
person
so that it can be strong enough to move out of the way, and Jake wants to shore
and to
up,
prove he's trustworthy.
And
like,
to prove he's
trustworthy by murdering someone for me.
This will clearly prove that you're trustworthy. But in any case, Jake ends up having sex with a townie woman that he has hired to manage the dollar store, because he's a problem alcoholic and has taken up residence in the motel she currently manages. She ends up catching feelings immediately for him, but Jake thinks that he's better than sleeping with the townie, and ends up rebuffing every single thing and not even attempting to be at all polite to her, basically.
Yeah, because he's supposed to be like the ruthless capitalist type. He's supposed to be wanting to hunger, to drive for dollars.
I don't think he is. I think you're actually misreading that. He's not a ruthless capitalist. He's traumatized by the lack of money, and he is trying to just make sure that he does not have to worry about where his money is coming from again.
Well, he wants to retire by 40.
They did talk about that.
Yeah, and he says this quote. He says, "I had seen the thin veneer on civilization, peeled back for a time, and realized it was the exact width of a dollar bill." A, a generally good line, and B, it should summarize his character. At least what he's supposed to be.
Sure, but he doesn't have any money. He's a wagey. He's getting sent out to bumfuck nowhere to build a dollar store. Those guys don't get paid that much. So,
Well,
like,
he said renovating the
like
house.
he works for the company. It's not his dollar store.
True, but
You know.
he says that selling the house will lead him with his first million or something like that. That's why he's repairing the house.
Yeah, he wants to make his first million. He
Yeah,
hasn't.
but he has that hustler mindset. He wants to be a hustler, like he says. Like, civilization is the width of a dollar bill, which is one of the good lines. But he kind of doesn't even act like that. He only acts like that with the bitch. Other than that, he kind of goes back to this kind of distant, very oddly formal pseudo Lovecraft prose when he's talking to himself or with the beetle.
Yeah, the way that I read the character was a little different. Obviously, he's extremely money focused, but it seems like it wasn't based on purely on personal avarice, but based on the millennial experience of not having financial security.
Yeah, the Great Recession.
He
talks about the Great Recession.
I think I think that's the more correct reading, just because of the overall concept.
It's hard to say though. I agree, but my only comment would be like, we're given a very small window where he just kind of he summarizes. Oh, there was a time when I was like, just in the backyard of a house that was underwater on the mortgage.
Yeah, he was a squatter.
There's like, it's like a real quick summary. Yeah, and that's pretty much the best window you get. And then there's the hint with the reference to he's like an influencer or some bullshit at the start, which I completely forgotten, and that might have helped build that out. But it wasn't really there. I did want to say I actually really dug the bug.
You dug the bug.
That was like the part when I was really pumped.
He's the best character.
I dug it. It was so interesting when like he actually I thought the chilling ghosty vibes. I liked that part. And then he goes down. It was a little bit ridiculous where he's just like, oh, I guess I'll just smash down this brick wall. Guess I'll go down towards this voice that's whispering, please save me, all hours of the day. It was a little bit flat the way
you
that
didn't
part.
buy it. You didn't buy the
wasn't
part where he's driving
very
him
scared.
crazy, where he's literally middle of fucking a bitch, and the only reason why he's hard is because he's fantasizing about breaking down that wall.
That wall, yeah, which was awesome. But the actual interaction with the bug was the peak.
I too have had erotic fixations upon construction.
Breaking that wall.
So breaking that wall.
And drilling. And the whole devil bargain, that whole build-up was good. I do actually want to give another good shout-out, something I really liked, because his absolute domination of women in this story...
Full incel. I loved it.
...was pretty noteworthy. All right, here's a particular line that stood out to me. This is during his awkward beach date, which was another huge dick move. He hates this bitch, and for some reason he takes her out to the beach.
Well, so he's trying to. So he has sex with her. She catches feelings. He doesn't give a shit about her
at all.
And so in one final attempt to like placate her before he like fucks off out of this town, he takes her to a little beach date, and he just doesn't want to be there, and it's basically like, we are now at the beach. Are you enjoying yourself? And she wants to do all sorts of stuff, and she wants to get frisky, and he's like, fuck that.
Maybe it's because I'm autistic. I related to this so much because I've never been with a chick I was going to break up with, but I went with an ex to a beach once, and I was just like, oh my God, just fucking kill me. And you talk about how she wanted him to run around with him and the waves and the beach and the sand. And I love this line. Women are television's greatest victims, I thought to myself. They will begrudge you for not acting like a character in a romantic comedy. The next test required delicate maneuvering. All I needed was a clean break. We were walking. Oh, they're right. Then he murders her. But I can relate to that. Like bitches trying to make you do little pirouettes on the beach.
To be fair to Jake the Millennial, it wasn't really a murder. It was more like negligent homicide,
which I didn't like either.
It was manslaughter. It was manslaughter.
How do you push a chick down
but he talks
cliff
like fucking Patrick Bateman. He's like, if she lives, it's murder. If she dies, it's murder. If she lives, it's attempted manslaughter. Like the POV says that, and that's where he goes back and forth between, is he ruthless? Like he's you all see the movie Nightcrawler with Gyllenhaal? Like he's Nightcrawler. He's basically what you even say.
Movie.
Nightcrawler.
His problem is not that he doesn't understand people.
Like this story should be Nightcrawler mixed with fucking Hellraiser, right? You know, that they find the box, he finds the beetle, and there's a little tension, but then he purposely gives, like, he cocked out. We should have at least seen him purposely give the body to the beetle at least once. This story was way too damn short.
Yeah, I
There's
agree.
so much stuff you could do.
You know, I thought that we were going to go with not quite a bonfire of the vanities, but like a downfall of man kind of thing with the Little Shop of Horrors theme. Right? Because the Beatles like give me a body, and he's like, I can't just murder somebody. And he doesn't want to do it. And then, oh, lo and behold, he accidentally murders somebody and needs to get rid of a body. So now he's going to start feeding the beetle, and then he's going to kill the historical society guy, and then he's going to kill someone else, and then et cetera, and it's going to be a downward spiral. But then what happens is that he's like, oh, well, they get into an argument. She hits him. He pushes her. She falls down a cliff and dies. He gets her body, puts her in the trunk. He's on his way back to give her body to the beetle, apparently. And then the beetle just decides, you know what, fuck this, and leaves after a century of just hanging out in the basement of this
No, you
house.
forget there was an
And the
earthquake.
house
It was
collapses.
there's like one line.
No. The earthquake was the beetle moving.
Because he even references it, the earthquake from the historical times.
Yeah.
I think it's unclear on both of them if he was the earthquake the first time or if he was confused
because the
by
Beatles.
it. So I saw it as open.
No, the Beatles said he was
the Earth was
confused,
screaming.
but
That's what he calls it, earthquake.
The
Earth
Beatles said he was confused, and he ended up bursting through the wall and like being there. But apparently he could. Yeah, it just the house collapses. Beetle's gone. He's got a corpse, and so he comes to Boomer Townie and is like, hey, there's a body in the trunk here. Here's what happened. There's a big old beetle. I'm gonna like fake. I'm gonna like just fuck off and ride the rails and be a hobo.
He's free from the American mirage.
See
that's the ending line, right? Because he references the American dream about how boomers tell you, like, oh, son, if you gotta work, just work harder, bro. And that's what even started the fight with him and the bitch, because she's like, oh, all you care about is money. Right? And of course, when you read this, she's like, he does. Other than that one time when he talks about like being homeless, like an obligatory like pop culture millennial reference, he doesn't even act like that. Because the only person he talks to is the boomer with like one dialogue and doesn't even reference the cash or the idea of making money. So the idea of him being this ruthless capitalist, or trying to be, right? He's the hustler, right? He's the hustler archetype. Right, so he slaps her over this one little thing.
Yeah.
It blew balls on character development, right? It'll be because the Beetle is the only one with actual character development. He doesn't like being human. He doesn't like being able to think. He even says, before then I was a beast. Now I'm a monster. That's actually a damn good line. Or when
that was a great scene where he describes how like, before he was given language, he was just like in the earth and eating shit, and he was fine. He was everything was good. But now he has language, which means he has thought.
Yeah.
Which means that he
and
is
this is actually
suffering.
a callback, oddly enough, to Holy Hunt. Because if you remember when he tries to get metaphysical with Lazarus, he also associates language with the idea of like sin, or like the idea of reason as sinful, that the innocence of lack of thought or lack of ability to speak is in kind of more of a Platonic ideal of nature. Like,
that you're pure because you're unable to engage in cognition.
and the dialogue
At a higher
bounces.
level.
He remembers how to bounce dialogue briefly
with the bug,
right? When Peter he asks him, "Hey, do you believe in God?" And he's like, "I didn't even think of the concept back then. That doesn't answer my question." It does.
I had another theory that proved out not to be true, but I thought was super cool, and just there's so much potential with the bug. I thought it might have been, he talks about there's like these caves underground, and there's like some sense of others, like other beings. And I was like, oh, is this going to turn out he's going to like trick him? And actually this is going to be like a satanic bug. and like he's going to drag him into hell or some kind of hell pact, and like the other guys were some kind of Cthulhu-esque cult or something, and the modern naivete or that isn't all what happened. But it's just to say, like, that whole part, my mind was racing with all these ideas, but the pacing of kind of the majority of these stories, and to me this one is the biggest offender, is we always have this huge lag. We always get an intro and then just this huge sag, and then it's this. Then the actual plot happens in the last.
Yeah. And he will dodge if the interaction between characters is complex. I'm not even talking about like even narratively. I'm talking about construction. Like as a writer, he thinks it's gonna be complex. He dodges it. Like when he first has sex with a girl, he even says, "Oh, she talks like a television cliche." Right? Like he sees her smoking, and he just presses that fast forward button. He slams the fast forward button. There's no buildup. Anytime buildup is involved, you had this problem with the animals, right? Remember the animals in Holy Hunt? He never describes the nature or what it's like to be in this town or the air. Like the prose is very thin. Description is very thin. He can't get step. He wants him to fuck her. How do I get him to fuck her? Oh, fuck. They get drunk. He immediately has sex with her. He thinks about the beetle and then fucks off, basically.
I love how unattractive she was, though. Because she was described with, like, varicose veins, just being, like, a stinky cigarette bitch. I love that. I don't know. You guys had mentioned the grittiness before. Like, there was some redeeming stuff in this one, but to me, just the POV and pacing were just so rough, and it just kind of ended in a rush. I'm not really sure what it was going for with the murder, with the convenient murder.
The thing is, there is a mood. There is the mood every time when he tries to build some suspense. It's very shaky. It's crooked, but there is some gravitas or ethos. When the Beatles sings, and one of the songs, I googled it. It's the Dying Californian, the one that with the lyrics about finding gold and the gold is in heaven, not of earth, because that gold never decays. So it's also. There is a sense of ethos there, but the ethos is with the beetle, right? Which he barely spends any time on, right? You have this great arc of Casper, right? The lust of Casper, and with Gene, the boomer, and you have Peter, the millennial. And I thought, like, we all had different theories of what this is going to be, right? We thought, it's either going to...
I'm pretty sure his name is Jake.
Or Peter. Yeah. Right, Jake. Right. You think that it will be the cyclical thing, right? Because he wants it. Why is the narration even necessary? Why is this what is it called? Pastoral. When the novel's told via like literary analog. Why is the narrator necessary if you're not going to do anything interesting with it?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like. My fucking favorite novel of all time is Pale Fire, and half the fun of that is Nabokov is like a schizo, right? It's perfectly schizophrenic where you don't know the reality of, is it a narrator fucking with me, or is it the actual text, right? Cap, you say it's kind of the boomers kind of fucking with you, but he doesn't play enough in terms of prose and structure,
I'm just saying it is a possible reading, and maybe it's the most. Maybe it's a unreasonably charitable reading, but it is more coherent than just taking the story at face value.
He has not even attempted anything like Straussian or anything like that enough to me to give it to him like that.
Oh man, we got it. Straussian count at one.
You were making the Straussian reference with the argument, right? And that would have been clever.
All right.
Sure.
But he doesn't do it. And again, the Beatles, like, are you going to fuck me over like a Casper did? Do you care about money like he did? Because all he cared about was money. And also, Casper has more depth and more relationship with the fucking Beetle, right? Because he would sing to him and like tell him about God, and he named him Kukuri, which is the Egyptian sun god. And it means new beginnings, by the way, which is yet again, it's some thematic thing where the Beetle, the god in Egyptian, the Kukuri, means new beginnings or rebirth or new sunrise. So he talks about the American dream as
Beetle that rolls the sun across the...
So he talks about the American dream as really a mirage. And that's one of the last lines, right? He tells the old guy, I'm gonna just go coast and leave the American. Oh no, he didn't even say American Mirage. He just says Mirage, and the Boomer's confused. He's like, I have no idea what he means. I think that's the last words. Is I don't know what he meant. That's actually the last words of the piece, right? And so he's not driven crazy. It's all the Beetle does is speak and play music. There's not enough supernatural elements. I mean, other than a giant beetle, and there's. Because remember, the hook of it is one guy has killed himself in this house before, and has had a few owners previously. So all the Beetle is playing music, and attempting at speaking, and all he's asking for is help, and like, hey, hello, can you help me? I need to escape.
Literally, just feed me.
Yeah, help me! I'm trapped. I can't understand what you're saying. I know that you can hear me. But I'm in the basement, so if you could help me out, that would be great. It's like, yeah, he has a bad connection. He can't hear shit unless someone's right in front of him. But he can talk. Yeah. There's like a Victrola in front of him.
Dude, the whole story was a "Can you hear me now?" meme. There's a millennial callback.
Music is the only thing he has happiness.
You got the
Sprint?
old Sprint ad subtext. That was it.
Yeah.
We got it.
A millennial reference for the millennial book. And
but did you guys have anything else on this one? I don't want to just circle it too much.
It's the criticisms being a death. I think this could have been a really good story overall. It was fun. I think it was fun. I had a smile on my face this time. I had all the criticisms, but when I reread it a second time, I'm like, okay, don't give a shit about the prose. Don't be analytical. And I think the potential for it was really strong. The Beetle, the best parts of the dialogue is the same thing with Falwell. That's why I contrasted with Falwell. I think the platonic ideal of this story could be right up there with Falwell, right? Because you have the main protagonist. He meets another entity, right? A character that's in the know or outside his world. And it fundamentally shapes and changes his view on reality and existence. And also with the whole God and sunrise thing. The sun plays in both ones. The symbol of the sun is on the tie of glory. And of course, the beetle is a sun god. The beetle's named after a sun god. And so it could have been a beautiful high and low thing where, the beginning story ends with hope. This story ends with sadness and greed and a tragedy. Right, he lets his wanting of wealth after being fucked over. He instead of being released from guilt, he is so obsessed with being fucked over by boomers. The millennial is in the wrong. That's the thing here. The millennial is not in the wrong in any of these stories. The millennial is something to be feel empathy for, constant empathy for. So instead of letting the millennial being so hateful of the boomers who fucked him over in the recession crisis, raising $30,000 in debt, he's like, you know what, fuck everyone, fuck all the rules. I've tried playing the rules. He fucks me over. I'm going to do a deal with this beetle. And then this beautiful little tie bow could have happened. But he didn't, which I think overall is the structure is not, it's just not there.
That was my TLDR is just that I thought conceptually it was outstanding, but yeah, it just the POV and the pacing structure of it was just really wonky this is in my notes I had, Gabe, last time you said that the fuck it, do it again to Holy Hunt, and I said the opposite. I was like, I think it's like 75% there. Could use touch-ups at the end, basically. I think for me, that's this one. This is the one where I'm like, I would just say, take your ideas and just rework it.
There should have been two characters. It should have just been Jake and the Bug.
And
this should have been the novella.
In a box.
This should have been the novella. This should have been at least 130 pages,
pretty much.
I'd say. Or 110 at least.
Yeah, I would have donated some pages from American Bastard to this. All right, Cash, did you have any last thoughts on Casper?
Well, that was it. That really this should have been longer, and they should have cut down on the superfluous characters. Like the historical society guy is completely superfluous,
and the boomer
didn't need his perspective at all. Didn't. Well, I mean, yeah, either you expand them or you cut them. right? Like, those are your two options.
Kill all boomers.
You know,
get all the boomers
you can
out.
just say, hey, I went to the Historical Society and they gave me this information, blah, blah, blah. I feel like you already have a perspective.
Or the main character can just call him himself and just say, hey, Historical Society, I had this bizarre experience. Yeah, and there.
That's what I'm saying. The character says, I went to the Historical Society and I found out this information about the blah, blah, blah,
So I think we've said our fill on Casper House. All right, then let's jump ahead to American Bastard. American Bastard, in summary, is a first-person story of a heir to a large multinational mega corporation whose father just passed away. In the millennial experience, this is our touch point with the Occupy Wall Street, where our protagonist is a burnt-out former Occupy Wall Street protester, and then became kind of a pre-bread tube scuzzbag leftoid who basically never made anything of his life. We start with the story. He's wandering the Appalachian Trail. One of his father's henchmen pick him up, takes him in a helicopter.
His father's major domo.
His major domo. His godfather, right-hand guy. Was it Consigliere? Consigliere, thank you. That guy. He picks him up, takes him in a helicopter to his father's estate, where his father just passed away. Meets some people, goes to New York, starts scheming. He finds out that he has been bequeathed upon his father's death a 50% stake in this large multinational corporation. And he comes up with this scheme to get, a voting majority and a CEO in place under him so that he can dissolve the corporation. The story progresses, they have a vote, and then it ends with him not succeeding the way he wanted to, but succeeding the way he needed to by deciding he wants to go get his son, who we find during the course of the story that he's estranged from his son and his ex-wife, who was another, rabid, crazy woman who left him for a rich lawyer type guy. So that's the plot gist of it. My main thoughts with this was, again, POV pacing issues. POV is first person. I never believed for a minute that the guy who was speaking was a leftoid. He never spoke like a leftoid. His phrasing, I have several specific quotes called out. I'll pull up in a minute.
He's pantomiming. It's pure kabuki theater.
Yeah. It's just, I'll pull it up when you guys are talking so I don't mess up the pacing. But yeah, he speaks like every other Marty Phillips, the guys in the previous story. In the pacing, for me, so it starts out interesting. We're in the Appalachian Trail. We get a helicopter. We go to the house, and then we just slam the brakes, and then we're meeting person after person after person we meet, a spirit woman who never amounts to anything.
Oh, but the spirit woman is actually critical to the storyline,
to the nightmare element.
Yeah, and the bouquet and being shut out.
Okay, what's your read of the spirit woman? Because I followed her in terms of the dream, but what was the bouquet thing?
I think the spirit woman was a sort of a connection to like religion and spirituality in general. Honestly, kind of even a sort of more primal, I guess you could even say rewilding kind of spirit. And I think that when Andrew Ashbury, the protagonist, shuts her out, I think that he shuts out his only path to success. I actually think that was completely intentional, because before he shut her out, he was unstoppable.
Well, remember also, by the way, he references the Inferno when he's going up the mountain. It's on the first page. He feels like, so basically she's Beatrice. If you accept Beatrice, you get into Paradiso, you get into paradise. She's associated with paradise. So he did.
Yep. Well, and Terry Sykes, the major domo of the father, is pretty clearly a Virgil, because he's omnicompetent, knows absolutely everything that's going on, knows the names of everybody, and is a critical advisor, and is really, kind of part of the inheritance, it seems.
And also another case of where the second, not the main character, but the second character has a lot more legs to stand on than the main character in terms of development.
Yeah,
That's a major theme across 3 out of 4 of these stories.
Well, and Terry has a actually fairly well developed and distinct voice.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Ashbury does not, and actually Andrew Ashbury isn't particularly consistent throughout the story, because there are several sections where he goes into this like Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock sort of, L from Death Note sort of like hyperfixation on gesture and subtext in a conversation with other people, where he's analyzing and sort of doing verbal battle at light speed, which is not in other scenes. It just doesn't exist in other scenes. So, I think that was a little bit of a fault in the story, where the tone and perspective of the main character was inconsistent.
Wait, can you guys red pill me on the spirit woman, the ending though? Because I don't remember him parting from her the second time. I remember the first time they had a spat, but there was a second time?
Okay, so spirit woman clearly responsible for feeding him, whatever life-giving elixir in the quote-unquote nightmare, in the dream. Yeah. After which he has an absolutely dominant day.
Yeah.
Total Sigma grind set, goes in, talks to the CEO, sits at the owner's desk, and is just like, "Fuck you! I'm in charge here. This is how it's going to be." Gets almost complete capitulation, right? Say he wins 90% of the interaction. Goes on, gets a bunch of other stuff done that day. Goes home. There's a big bouquet full of wildflowers, not like roses, not tulips, nothing cultivated. He said it looked like a cutting from a jungle. Mm-hmm. And it's producing this incredibly like powerful, earthy, primal smell. And he's still freaking out about the invasion into his life of this from this nightmare. So he cuts off Spirit Woman's card access to the penthouse he's staying in, and he puts the bouquet on the balcony.
And it's a good theme. It's actually a good theme.
And that's him cutting it off. And he only fails from
I have zero memory of that scene. To be confession time, I actually was on medication when I read the last half of this, so maybe that was why I didn't remember. I have zero memory of that scene.
Man, if I was Marty Phillips, I would be pretty upset that someone was reviewing his book less than glowingly, admitting he was on meds at the time.
It's called Tramadol. It is an opioid, but only for the.
It's sad because that aspect of it was actually kind of well done. The theme, the messaging on there, was a lot more, I guess, genuine, less in your face, I would say.
And I do want to say that I think that this story, I think that it would be incorrect to say that this was just the Occupy Wall Street thing. I think it's kind of about the way that the very active sort of populist left in the first decade of the millennium was really neutered following Obama's election. And so everything, they had this massive populist movement that got completely co-opted. Mm-hmm. And you can tell that because the head of the corporate board, when he ends up having a meeting, who's the like DEI executive, says, we should take an example from Occupy Wall Street and make sure that the person that when we are hiring a new CEO, we make sure that we focus on diversity. And it's like, and the obviously not a leftist protagonist says that isn't what Occupy Wall Street was about.
Dude, he's the labor left, bro. He's like a dirtbag leftist, like, which was the edgy thing at the time, right? Most people.
I mean, it's true. Occupy Wall Street was not. It had nothing to do with race. Like everyone is the society was post-racial at that time. There's a fair argument to be said that if you were like hard left during those days, today you're on the right. If you look at old posts on
4chan,
Yeah, pretty much.
If you look at old posts on 4chan,
still be
they're
on the
like
right.
Fucking anonymous.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think anonymous was? They were very Occupy pilled.
Right. Exactly.
And you're right, but he also manages to tie almost all the stories together in this. They mentioned 9/11. They mentioned the Mayans. And he does kind of come into a piece. Mm-hmm. And I think the overall message of the novel can be kind of summed up in this kind of paragraph. Supposedly the Mayans, or some civilization, has a calendar that ends this year in December sometime. I read a little about it on the internet, and apparently there are a bunch of astronomical convergences that are supposed to happen around at the same time. Seems kind of goofy, but it's fun to read about. Deep down, everyone wants the world to end, I said, feeling in the wake of my recent failures that perhaps there was some kind of great cosmic unraveling imminent. Seems like the world ends every few years and nobody notices. They expect floods and fires, but in the end, they're lucky if they even noticed that one article in business section that would have let them know it had happened. And that's kind of the millennial ethos. When you look at this paragraph, when you realize is the entire thing, he's trying to do, it's a biblical event. It is the Noah's flood. It is the destruction of Sodom. Everything is this, but it's done via economics. It's done via, if you notice, like the four horsemen, right? He's trying to go like, you got the Wall Street, you got Occupy, you got 9/11, you got the war, right? All of these stories, he talks about this in the interview. He says, all these interwrap, these are layers, they interconnect. These are separate stories, but they're of one piece in more ways than one. And this story kind of verifies this. Between the fathers and sons, if you notice, half the stories had to deal with this. A father in conflict with son, because if you remember Holy Hunt, I feel sorry for you if you do, but the protagonist, his whole story starts off with him hating his father. And his father was the bad boomer, right, who denied his son a legacy. And if you notice when he watches the video footage of his father in here, when he opens up the visual will, he says, I'm not going to deny you. I know we view differently on politics, but, I'm not going to deny you your heritage. I'm not going to deny you. You deserve it. I know you fundamentally do as my progeny. And his father, oddly enough, in a very abstract way, is the good boomer, right? And also...
Well, he's the one who's willing to pass on the responsibility for the world to the millennial generation, right? He's the one who's willing to allow.
Yes, but the father figure in Holy Hunt, he casts him to hell. Basically, his refusal of his son literally does cast him to hell and torture. Right? And so. That's the one good thing. Yeah. And this paragraph kind of goes to it. This story, in a way, revives the other four. In a sense, like, you can see if he managed to pull this off, if he actually managed to do it where it was intentional and, like, polish it, extremely polish everything, like 3 drafts, and really focus on this. Like a calendar, right? Each of the stories is a kind of sort of calendar to the end, right? Instead of a 12, it's 4, right? You got chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It's perfect. It fits perfectly.
Right. Yes. You have the fall, and then you have limbo, and then you have hell, and then you have paradiso. And I actually think that, and we can get there, because obviously the approach. So in this story, at one point, as part of the attempt to get enough votes to dissolve the corporation, the protagonist decides to try to contact this Chinese conglomerate who owns 30% of the company. So they're the second largest shareholder of voting shares, and there's sort of this little investigative thing where it's extremely shady, and the protagonist and Terry, the stand-in for Virgil, are going from like various fake storefronts to try to get in touch with what is it, Southwind?
Seawind, I believe.
Seawinds, yeah. Seawinds, the Chinese company, and eventually they end up at this warehouse. Yeah, Seawind, and eventually they end up at this warehouse, and they go inside, and it's an incredibly hot tunnel with full of red light, which is not
very subtle, very subtle
of
theme.
hell, and so they pass through hell, and they come to this room. It's a vast room with a single spotlight, and they walk into the light, and they talk to an interpreter and to this man who is described as, so he's smoking nonstop, and he's described as, rather than just speaking Mandarin, he's barking. So he's the most Luciferian possible figure. And he says he doesn't he says Americans are incredibly stupid. He doesn't understand them, and that while they understand his perspective, it is not what they want. And so that was the Hail Mary for the protagonist to dissolve the company, and so he's rebuffed. And they end up leaving the situation. So obviously, so there's one. This is not even subtext at this point. The rising threat.
Wasn't his name Maxwell?
China, in the 21st century is clearly here. But of course they're playing the role of
pretty much
of the devil,
the Chinese devils, yes,
and the Chinese devil, or that
still a more sensitive Asian portrayal than Mixtape Hyperborea. Somehow it's still more sensitive.
So following that, there is a brief encounter with some glowies, basically very similar glowies to those in Falwell. Andrew Ashbury, the protagonist, is warned against digging into this situation any further. So he talks to his Virgil stand-in and says, let's go find my son. And Terry says that he was waiting.
He was released to his true
the
calling.
Entire time, or he gave me a knowing smile, a look that said he had known all roads would lead here at some point, and he was finally released to his true calling. So that's the redemption, right? That's the end. The last story in this sort of ties everything together. And the redemption is, in my reading,
it's blood over capital.
I feel like there's a certain number of words that describe this.
What is it? 1472.
You have to say something. I don't know. It's something like that. But something about securing a future for children. And like I think that yes, aside from that possible subtext, I think that just the bare normie, the bread and butter type of good life is what it's pointing towards. Like, there's if if the boomers would pass down the torch to the the millennials, and the millennials could get on with raising their children, that's the path, and that's the true calling, and all this other shit, right? That has delayed the millennial generation from the true calling is the sideshow, and is lesser than that
Agreed.
true calling.
I think that's actually a spot on reading. And also, in a lot of ways, this is a very anti-capitalist book when you think about it. Like, maybe actually is probably intentional with the current new right is very openly anti-capital. But he's because when you think about it, the first story, well, the trade center, trade, right? The vocal point, the very first story is a trade center, right? Trade. Second one is about global dominance. The third one also about lust for money, quite literally the millennial wanting to strive for cash. Strive. You know, if it was if the protagonist of Casper was in Terry's situation, he would have jumped for joy. Dude, he inherited this company. You know, he is unscrupulous. His only scruple is survival.
Just sold out right away.
Like
Right, yeah, he's definitely and I mean, I realize that it's a squishy word, but yeah, he's traumatized by by the economic like things that he's experienced. Right, and it's turned him into a shithead.
Yeah, capital is poison.
Basically, he's just obsessed. He's obsessed with acquiring currency and disregarding
He's
women.
the Sigma grind set. He's the one on the TikToks. Aren't we all? But also, he associates a capital of America, right? Because the last page, if you were to take the last paragraph and give it to a leftist, you know, they'd think it's kind of corny, but they would fundamentally agree with it. Because America as a prison. If you notice, there's very few positive portrayals of Americana. There's nothing. You give this to a Fox News boomer, he would not like this, right? For multiple reasons, right? But basically, to the boomer,
right,
he would think he portrays it as a prison warden. You know, it is America is a prison. It is a torture cell, and like here's the paragraph, actually. I understood that as a son of America, I was born into a whirlwind, fatherless and without history, because none of it was truly given. Everything had been passed down as transaction. There was some truth hidden in the blood, yet made insignificant by comrades, because as one man once told me, water is thinner than blood, but money is thicker than both. I had not been wrong to rage against it, but a fatherless son is lost, left always to wander. I did not know if my soul was destined for eternity, as had been prophesied, but blood is the closest thing to it on this earth, and it was worth striving for. And so that's the blurb, that's the speech, that's the Morgan Freeman speech at the end of 7, right? It's the closest thing to eternity, the closest thing to immortality is blood. Is family, is the roots, is the ethnos, right? He comes back to the Spenglerian thing. And if you notice in this paragraph, it calls back to like the last 4, because there's little hints of Ashley, right? This America is a self-deleting virus, always progressing, right? We have no history, right? It's fatherless, it's a whirlwind, it's a hurricane, America as transaction, which actually has a lot to do with historical takes. I mean, the man who coined the term frontier, Frederick Jackson Turner, he says, the frontier and America as a whole is symbolism of capital growth. America is defined by commerce, right? Defined by commerce. It's a capital adventure. The idea of business and striving and the American colossus. If you look at all ancient, like the 1890s, right? Everyone's favorite hero was Thomas Edison or like Andrew Carnegie or Henry Ford, right? If you look at like the American is invigorated by capital, and of course it's poisoned, but still almost a Freudian thing. You don't see anything. You don't see the industryman as a hero in the continent of Europe, right? The haunting of the capital, the captain of industry, does not haunt the continent. Maybe a little bit in Britain, but it's full blown spread in America. right? The capitalist colossus looms high in America, and this little paragraph is basically Marty. It's obviously Marty, right? Whenever he talks about something like this, the author basically just goes on stage and says, "Hey, this is basically my philosophy," right? He's not very subtle when he does stuff like this.
Yeah. It's the full. Let me read you my.
But it works here. It doesn't.
But it's a good manifesto. Yes. And to your interpretation, Gabe, then it would be the millennial is releasing that corporate American identity and becoming, maybe it's a white identity, maybe it's another identity, but a more a different identity is sort of is the death of America. maybe that I guess that is the theme of the book.
Yeah.
Return with a V.
He goes to go find his son, and then at the end of the day, he drops his ideology. Right? He drops the hatred of capital. He lets go. He's no longer haunted. Right? The message. I wish the author, in a lot of ways, embodied this message with the rest of the stories. Right? Because the protagonist does what I think Phillips should have done, which is he lets go. Right? He is trapped and traumatized. This is like generational PTSD, or what the fucking woke people say. What generational trauma? Right? Because the inherited trauma of America. But he says, let's go find my son. Right? The blood is all that matters. And I actually do not think... I know... Yeah, go ahead.
And again, that point of, the idea of generational trauma that the left uses is, almost entirely exclusively within racial boundaries. And I think that this story actually has like kind of a sympathetic... kind of treats the left with sympathy, because of the co-option of all of their like class-based work, frankly. It doesn't. Marty does not seem to disagree with things like the World Trade Organization protest, which is referenced in this story, or Occupy Wall Street, of course.
All right. I don't have anything else. Actually, I hardly have anything on American Bastard. I guess to tie back to an earlier comment you made, because you guys have gone off on a little bit of a, what's the metaphor? What's the allegory? Which is a good tangent to go on, but I don't get a lot out of that, and I've had to force myself to return to the, like, with each section. Return with a V to the allegory. And Cap, you mentioned at the beginning how you thought it had a bit of a challenge that was trying to tag up with that. Is it? Well, I guess quickly, do you guys feel like there is value in trying to fit these, allegorical tie-ins in? Does it? I
mean, I think that's the main value. I mean, I think it was clearly prioritized. It was clearly prioritized. Oh.
Well, I guess two-part. Does it work, and is it worth it? Because to me, it might just be a style thing. I do not personally like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the art of it suffered for its attempt to be didactic. Like, I think it definitely. I think that Marty has better writing in him that isn't attempting to like make sure that all of these pieces fit together just so. And I don't think that it needs to be I think he can get the message across without I guess cleaving so tightly to stuff. You could write a story about 9/11 without actually setting it in the towers. Right. I mean, and I'm not criticizing the structure of Falwell.
The best one.
I think Falwell is actually good, and I think it's the best one. And if this was an entire book full of Falwells, I'd give it an A. Right.
Same.
But given the
the rest isn't Falwells, it's Fallbads.
Gabe being savage. I mean, I don't think this is a bad book. I think I'd give it a C. It's a passing grade. I don't know that I would go back and read Marty's earlier work necessarily, But I definitely
Agreed.
would read his subsequent work. I would definitely be interested in reading in his next project, because I think he does have talent, and I think that there are some like really strong passages in this, and I think that, you know, really hammering out the you know, just hammering out the story structure it is what he needs to work on. The story structure is and to a lesser extent dialogue, and he improved through this book. I mean, it was inconsistent with the dialogue, but there are portions where the dialogue is, you have plenty of very distinct voices that are interesting to see bouncing off of each other. But yeah, I mean, I think that he's got the hard part, and if he's willing to put in the hard and tedious work of making a really strongly structured piece of writing, I think that he could really put out
I
something
concur.
great.
I mean, he actually just started writing his second. He's writing on a new project. He started like August 18th, I think. For me,
I'll read it.
you know, he actually wrote this. He says that he wrote this in longhand. Actually, the script for Millennium was all in longhand, and that requires a lot of dedication, a lot of Asperger's to do that. But yet again, I think it leads to the fact that he doesn't know how to edit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if you write a full manuscript longhand, it takes a mega Asperger's to edit it longhand. So I think that's kind of what leads to it. I do agree with structure. Dialogue, he's good at dialogue. The structure of dialogue is fine. What I think is voice. A voice is something he has deep trouble with. If it isn't him, I highly recommend for him to read Lectures on Literature by Nabokov. Nabokov says that overall,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not much of a writer.
it's a magnificent. It's the first paragraph is nothing but like starter pack. You know, a good writer is not a main character. You don't have to relate to a main character. Relatability is bullshit. You know, in a proper way, you should be able to give this to a person born in 1920 France and should be able to get it. He uses catchphrases, right? The referencing to the Wall Street crash, or again Twin Towers, or something like this. The tragedy, he's writing this for you as a reader to get the reference and to feel that pain. It's a collective pain. It's mimetic, right? He's almost writing as a form of therapy, right? Nabokov said, you should write with the passion of the scientist and the diligence of a writer, right? But it's a reverse of what you expect. But basically, what he's trying to say is the raw sciences, the material world, is a deeply, deeply hands-on thing. And to make that into actually something to be seen, right? Because you got data and data crunchers to present the data, right? That's where the sculptor, the poet, you structure it, right? This is a scream. This is a scream from a millennial. And if you relate to me, isn't this relatable? I need you to relate to this, right? He's dampening so hard on this that if, will generations 2 decades from now understand this? No, right? Referencing, it's like, it's like All Quiet on the Western Front, right? Or all the things they carried, right? Where they bitch about World War II or World War I, right?
Vietnam, but yeah.
It does not hit. Yeah, it doesn't hit, because when you rely on the strength of your writing as a reference between the audience and you, and you're like, hey, we have this shared reference, then it's a what Harold Bloom would call a period piece, right? The dustbin is filled with period pieces, right? The things that stand the test of time, like Dante, like American Bastard. I think if I were to give it, there's 2 stories that are strong. American Bastard is the one I can see being less referential in the odd way, that kind of stands up on its own without being, look at me, I'm the millennial. The millennial is a prisoner. I'm being tortured. America's torturing me. The millennial is a complete victim, right? So what I'd say for him is work on structure, which is the general as Cap. Work on voice, distancing yourself. He should be able to distance himself from the audience. Like, no, Dostoevsky, right? Dostoevsky was a hardcore Christian, yet he can write. He wrote the best atheist in fiction in Brothers Karamazov, right? The Brothers Karamazov is nothing but character porn. Dostoevsky is amazing with voices, with a variety of voices, right? He can inhibit any personality at any time. Where with Phillips, if it's not a personality he can relate to, it's so distant, right? It's a action figure, basically, as I said multiple times. I need this character to do X, Y, and Z. And the third final piece of advice would be working on prose, right? You got to be more detailed. I'm not asking for Proust. Well, what I'm asking for, I know it's difficult, I know it's complicated, right? But do not blue ball the audience and just kind of say, "Oh, this happened."
Well, he does have some good passages. Like, it's in him. He's got it. He can do it.
Yes,
he just needs to be more consistent
shortcuts
with it.
Right? You could tell he kind of blue balls himself. He kind of is afraid to do it.
There's just a little bit. There's just like a little bit that in this book, and like I sort of referenced before, where he's kind of referring to events and sort of like Billy Joel, "We didn't start the fire," where it's just like a list of events that someone alive from 2001 to 2012 would recognize. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, I get that, and I have a certain sort of feeling about those things, and everyone who is in my generation, I'm a millennial, everyone who's in my generation has certain feelings about those sorts of things. But yeah, is that going to land later on without a massive foreword by someone to contextualize it? Probably not. Right? Yeah. Probably not. You know, like, go look up the lyrics to "We Didn't Start the Fire" and tell me what everything is. Right. Because you don't know and I don't know.
I loved your comparison, Gabe, to the things they carried, not the comparison, your reference to it, because that's another, when we're talking about explanatory versus experiential writing, is the way I phrased it in the previous talk we had on this book. In the things they carried, for example, like, there's such minute detail and specificity to the little, like I was never in Vietnam. I never handled a military bag like that, but I could feel it, or those kind of sensory details rather than these summary descriptions. And I agree with your guys' summaries, and my phrasing was a little different. I had just POV pacing, but POV basically being voiced largely, and then specifically the viewpoint of the POV of the story itself. Having it, I think, simpler would be better. And I'm a little nervous finding out that he's taking on a whole another book all at once, because my note is that I think he needs to get bullied in a writing group for a little bit. Writing groups, I know some people really don't like them, but I feel like when you have really targeted areas, where I feel like I've seen him have the same challenge with these two or three things over this entire book, I think that would be the most helpful way to find people you respect or you can work with to get really harsh feedback on short stories or something, so you don't have to rewrite a whole damn book.
That would be my the keyword being his workshop.
I agree with you. And I think that when the keyword in workshop is work, but the thing that, so I know that the Prudentialist did an interview with Marty, and I'm going to listen to that. I did not listen to that in preparation for this intentionally, so that I wouldn't feel guided by it in my criticisms, critique, or analysis. But I'm going to listen to it afterwards, and I'm interested to hear what Marty has to say. And I think that there's this concept of no enemies to the right, and I think that sometimes that has a tendency to turn into a hug box, where everyone just has to signal boost and no one's allowed to criticize. And I think we should really focus on quality, basically. Nothing's going to be effective if the quality is not there. And so I think that attempting to be, constructive in our criticism is a way to really kind of move forward and get these types of underheard voices out there.
No, I agree with that.
basically.
It's fundamentally very true. And the thing is, the book is not even particularly political. Like in a sense, it's other than the foreword.
Well,
the foreword.
Yeah, a book about 9/11, and I mean, yes, it's not particularly political in an Antelope Hill way.
But
obviously,
it's portrayed as
topics.
it's forced upon him. It's the millennial again with his theme. It's more of an emotional response to politics. It is forced upon the millennial. Marty is in a way, in the political scene, is a failed normie, right? All the protagonists are normies, right? Joe Blows. That politics and events are forced upon them, right? They're forced to engage in this, and I feel that's a sense of Phillips, right? I think that's Phillips' view of politics in a lot of ways. I think in a lot of ways, if the cultural zeitgeist didn't change, if Gamergate didn't happen, or like the Wall Street thing didn't happen, or happened in a different way, he'd be a normie. He wouldn't be reading shit written by the equivalent of the alternate reality of Antelope Hill. Right, he was forced into this corner, right? The series of events around him, America, it's a Gnostic book. And fundamentally, the demiurge has forced him to become a political entity when he really didn't want to. And for me, I barely don't even see him as to my right, not really. Like for all my criticisms, it's basically just purely structural, purely.
All right, I'm fading. So, any last thoughts?
Dave, you still on opioids?
I'm off as of today. Disclaimer, it's from a doctor. I had surgery, so I'm allowed to have them. It's awful. It really makes me wonder how people use that shit. I was on it for like 24 hours or so, and like I literally could not watch like a fucking YouTube video. I could not like maintain focus. That's why I was like messaging you guys all the time, because I was just like, hey, what do you think about this?
Did you have enough? Coherence to stand half bent over on a street corner with a sign asking for money?
I had just enough coherence to hang upside down and read Millennium by Marty Phillips, the last 50 pages or whatever it was, and then review it to an audience, a willing audience.
Well, to be fair to Marty, you did hand off the reins to Gabe and me for that. So.
Thank God you guys were able to do that one. But that's a real millennial experience, though, to be tripping balls on Trapadone or whatever it's called and reading a book for a podcast.
Number one, I'm pretty sure it's Tramadol.
Is it Tramadol? Okay.
But I mean, hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're on Trapadone, which definitely sounds like a fake
George
drug.
No, that one turns you into
Dippadome.
You are king of the twinks. You have become the twink.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you go start menstruating.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Gabe.
The fact that you went there before you went for Trap House. You went to trannies before you went to slinging dope. Even though the context
the
was
homoerotic
smack.
attention, the eros was in me.
All right, I have a little thing, and this is a bit of an aside while we wrap it up here. Okay, so do you think that it's morally permissible to fill tranq guns with naloxone and shoot people in full dope lean with it? Because technically, it's legal to administer Narcan to people who are under the effect of illegal opiates. But is it morally permissible to shoot random fiends with a tranq gun that will make them sober and unable
Absolutely.
to get high for about 36
1000%.
hours? Thoughts?
Does the fiend consent?
No.
No,
They don't need to, though. Well, legally speaking,
I would say
it
would require a truly a person who does something like this is someone who knows this is thankless. And honestly, it's not even doing it for their fiend. He's doing it for himself. When you go out,
I mean, that's true.
Yes, you're doing it for yourself, right? Because you're going to cure him for 5 seconds. He's going to be right back on it, right? This is a statement.
Well, but no, but they can't. No, I mean So the effects of naloxone, also known as Narcan, is that it sobers you up from the effects of any opiates or opioids, but then also prevents you from getting high for like an extended period of time, more than a day sometimes. So, but it has no other effect, and it has no effect on people who are sober. So if you have strong suspicion that someone's under the effects of illegal opioids, that puts them at physical danger. And so the way that the laws work is that you don't need the consent from someone who you have a reasonable suspicion of being under the effects of illegal opioids to administer Narcan. And they're not specific on how you administer it.
It's a beautiful image.
So,
it's
NAP though, dude.
Like
NAP is the only law I
man who
observe.
makes San Francisco clean for a day, right? It only lasts for one day, but he just massacres. Yeah.
It's just got like a Gatling gun full of Narcan.
Syringes ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Do it.
Every shot is a heart shot too. It's like a fucking Call of Duty player.
Bam, bam, bam. Yeah, you're 360 no scoping smackheads, like just curing them of their addiction for one glorious day.
I like that imagery.
Well, you can catch that in Millennium too. Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah.
Please do it.
Please do it.
Or Mike
I can see
Ma,
Mike doing
whoever. Yeah, I mean it's got legs about for as long as a chapter in harassment architecture. But okay, guys. So next time,
Nutcell Part 1.
It's Nutcell-tember. Nutcell Part 1. We're going to be doing Dan Baltic's Nutcranker. Are you guys ready?
In preparation for this, I am no fapping until we do the podcast, actually. I want to be
Bullshit. You're not going to last a day.
Podcast. Yes. No. Listen, I've lasted a whole month, actually.
All right, let's do it. No, that's not really the spirit of Nutcell, though. I feel like there's no Nut November. I feel like it's all Nutcember.
No, yeah, but no, we nut as a celebration. Like, we actually, the Nutcranker and Incel, right? It's the battle between us, between like our nuts and our minds, right? We deny our nut until we explode.
I didn't
with the
think
podcast
about that. Yeah.
Of Nutcranker.
This is really getting close to Gabe lore.
No, it's not Gabe lore. It's us lore. It's
I'm not
thematic.
participating in this. If this is anything, it's Gabe lore.
Disavow.
Hey, in that case, you're officially the Coomer of the group.
Yeah, you're gonna be one that's not taking the vow of celibacy with us.
Captain Coomer.
Yeah, well,
Captain Coomer.
I'm married, fellas. I got duties.
What? You can give her a break for a week.
She won't give me a break.
All right. On that note, I'm throwing in the towel. Thank you guys. Another stimulating conversation.
All right.
Good night and goodbye.
Adios.
Good night, fellas. Next.
Good night.